I'm building a real-life version of my favourite childhood pinball game, Space Cadet Pinball. In case you missed the last video, here's a quick look back at what I've completed so far. I've built the main pop bumpers, the slingshots, the drop targets, the mini pop bumpers, the ball drop, and the flippers. If you missed the original video, you should go back now and check it out to see the finer details of how these mechanisms work, because I won't be going as in depth on the ones that are already complete in this video. Having said that, I wasn't that happy with the level of power I was getting out of most of the mechanisms in the last video. I've also had heaps of comments giving me some good ideas, along with pointing out some possible problems that I'll need to overcome. So before I get stuck into anything new, let's start by fixing up some of the existing problems, starting with the flippers. I have a whole list of things to look at for these, but one of the biggest problems that you guys pointed out to me is that my solenoids don't also have a low power coil like a real flipper. This is a problem because the flippers are controlled by the player, meaning the buttons could be held down for an extended period of time, which could cause them to overheat. To quote Technology Connections, and coils that overheat tend to get melty and smoky, and on rare occasions, fiery. I'm really trying to use frame type solenoids for all of this stuff because I don't know how readily available flipper solenoids are worldwide. They also don't come with a shaft, so we need to either have our own made or buy a flipper rebuild kit to go with it, which pushes up the price quite a bit. So before I make any changes to this mechanism, I want to do a little experiment. Because I'm driving these solenoids with a MOSFET instead of a relay, there's nothing to stop me from using PWM to reduce the amount of power the solenoid's consuming while it's held open. So I've made some changes in the code so that the solenoid is only held at full power for half a second after the button is pressed, and then it drops back to about 20% power to hold it in place. In my testing, I found that I was able to hold the solenoid open for extended periods of time with minimal increase in temperature. I did find that while it's in this mode, that a hard enough hit would cause the solenoid to snap back to closed, even with the button held, but I have plenty of headroom on the power, so I'll have to experiment when my bigger solenoids turn up. If I can't get them to stay up when the ball hits them, I still have a few tricks up my sleeve that I can try before swapping to a real pinball solenoid. One of the next problems was the rubber for the flippers. I used TPU to print mine in the previous video because I wasn't actually sure how springy they were supposed to be, but you guys made it very clear that they need to be much softer than what I ended up with. Fortunately, the flippers are one of the only components that worked out to be the correct scale, and I was able to track down some proper red silicon bands for them that fit perfectly, so that's that problem sorted. In order for the flippers to withstand the abuse that a more powerful solenoid can dish out, they're probably going to need to be a bit stronger. Printing these in a stronger material like nylon would probably solve the problem, but my little A1 can't do that because it doesn't have an enclosure. What I do have is this tough 1500 resin for my Form 4, so I'm going to give that a go. This material has a similar toughness to polypropylene, and unlike a lot of other SLA materials, it can flex without breaking, which I think means it'll be perfect for the flippers. After printing, this material goes into the curing station for 12 minutes at 70 degrees to ensure it's as tough as possible. I've set up a little durability test to compare the old flipper printed in PLA against the new tough 1500 flipper. The shaft of the flipper is held in the vise so it can't turn, and I'm going to use a bit of this PVC pipe to drop the ball directly onto the flipper from about 1.5 meters up. This should be far harder than the pinball will ever hit the flippers, so if the SLA print can survive this test, it should be fine. The tough 1500 flipper takes these hits beautifully as it has just a little bit of spring to it, so I think it will be perfect for the job. That's all I can do with the flippers until the bigger solenoids turn up, so we'll come back to this one later for a test. Let's move on to the next problem. The first revision of the large pop bumpers didn't perform nearly as well as I needed them to, so I spent some time testing and reviewing the slow motion footage, and I think I've worked out the problem. These solenoids only have about 9mm of travel, so if the outer edge of the ring starts above the ball, it won't even come close to hitting the center of the ball where it would provide the maximum amount of leverage. So I lowered the ring a bit to see if it improves the performance at all, and it has definitely made a bit of a difference as the ball is now reliably making it off the end of the ramp. It's still a bit underpowered though, so I thought I'd try it on 24 volts instead of 12, and wow, what a difference. I may still try it with a bigger solenoid when it arrives, but for reasons I'll explain a bit later, I think this is going to be enough power as it is. In the meantime, I want to make sure that the bumper ring is up to the challenge, as it's the part that cops the most abuse on the pop bumpers. On real pinball machines, these rings are metal, so I'm going to have a go at making my own metal rings. I had a couple of 1mm stainless rings laser cut, and I 3D printed this forming tool. It's just PLA, but it is 100% infill, so it shouldn't compress under load. The ring just sits on the bottom half of the form, and the top half lines up using the pin I printed into the model. I'm just using an arbor press to squeeze the two halves of the mold together, but now that I've seen how little pressure it actually took, I think you'd get away with doing this in a large vise. These metal rings should be more than strong enough to stand up to the abuse when the new solenoids arrive. Let's give it one more go with the metal ring installed. That looks like it's working nicely. If you want to make parts like these for yourself, this video sponsor PCBWay can help. For simple sheet metal parts with no folds like these bumper ring blanks, all you have to do is upload either a 3D model or even just a flat pattern of your part, then just select your quantity and material and away you go. If your parts have folds or holes that require threads to be tapped, you will also need to provide a simple drawing that explains those features. They can also provide a number of different surface finishes depending on the type of material you've chosen, but for these bumper rings, plain stainless steel is absolutely the go. So, if you need parts like these made, you know where to go. Thanks PCBWay for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back to the project. One other thing I can tackle before the new parts turn up is the rest of the top playfield. Just above the mini pop bumpers, there are a series of 3 rollover switches along with some lane dividers and lights for each one of the switches. There's also a hidden arrow light at the top of the ramp that we'll have to take care of. The large red light on the ramp is also something I'll have to look at, but it won't be in this section of the top playfield, so I'll worry about it in the future. All of this hardware is going to face the same restraints that the mini pop bumpers did because the ball has to be able to pass directly below parts of it. Since the textured clear tops for the mini pop bumpers came out so well in the last video, I've used the Form 4 to print more of them in clear V5 resin for these lights. They have a constant yellow tint in the game, but to simulate that, I'll simply run the lights on low brightness for when they aren't illuminated, and high brightness when they are. For the hidden arrow, I've just taken a rebate out of the back of the ramp where I can hide some lights. This way, hopefully they'll shine through the remaining plastic and reveal the arrow. The rollover switches is where it gets interesting. I've picked up a couple of these opto switches to try, which are just thin enough to mount laying flat below the playfield while still allowing the ball to pass below. I've also printed some little white borders for these holes just to match the look of the game. All that's left now is the little cards that sit in the slot to block the light of the switch when the ball presses on top. I've printed the final version of these in grey V5 resin simply because they're so small that I was struggling to get a good fit with the FDM printer. The only springs that I have that are small enough for this job are these PS4 trigger springs. They just drop into this slot and an M2 bolt holds it all in place. Now that I've got the lights and rollover switches sorted, all that's left to do here are the playfield dividers. To make these, along with pretty much all of the playfield borders later in the series, I'm going to be using acrylic. For simple, flat parts like this, laser cutting is just so much quicker than 3D printing. This machine is the Turbo 747 by Omtech, and it has a 70 watt CO2 laser that makes short work of thin acrylic like this, which means these little parts only take a couple of seconds each. For the lane dividers, I'm using red acrylic for the top layer and white for the bottom to match the game. At the same time, I'm making the covers for the back of the mini pop bumpers that will stop the ball from getting trapped behind them. These ones are black and white. Now all that's done, let's give it a quick test. The switches work really well and the lights look fantastic. There is one little problem though, there isn't enough room between the dividers for the ball. That's okay though, because I have a solution. A lot of you pointed out that I probably should have scaled this table around the ball size instead of the way I did it, since most pinball machines use a 27mm ball. I'll admit, I didn't actually think of that, but I'm glad I didn't do it that way, because if I scaled everything to match the ball size, the flippers would have been much larger than standard, and as some of you have also pointed out, it would actually be an advantage to use a smaller ball in this machine because they're slightly less destructive. So I picked up a 20mm ball instead, which matches the scale I've picked, and it has no trouble fitting through this gap. I will have to adjust the height of a couple of things, but that's an easy enough problem to fix later. The next thing I wanted to tackle is the ball return mechanism. Because this game has a right-hand side kickback lane, there's no room for a traditional ball return mechanism, so I had to get a bit creative on this one. In the game, the ball just appears to drop into the lane from thin air, which gave me an idea. I wonder if I can push the ball up into the lane from below the playfield instead. That's how this crazy contraption became a thing. I made a bracket for the back of the solenoid so that it pushes instead of pulls, and attached it to this arm. The arm pivots from below the playfield so that when the solenoid fires, it will spit the ball up into the lane. I've printed a little test ramp and mounted everything, so let's give it a go. Nice, that works great. There's still more to this challenge though, because now I need to transport the ball from the drain at the bottom of the playfield and get it back up to this mechanism so that we can lift it back up into play. The lifter mechanism has to be a fair way up the board because the kickbacks take up a bit of room at the bottom of the lanes, so this ball is going to need to travel a fair way. It's also getting pretty tight below the playfield with a lot of mechanisms now in close proximity to the ball return, so I really didn't have much room to work with. I can't easily attach this channel to the lifter mechanism without a playfield to bolt everything onto, but I can at least give you a demo of what's already here. The first part of the puzzle is the drain itself. This will be recessed into the bottom of the playfield where it can't be seen, and I'll use a thin bit of acrylic to cover over the top of it, leaving just a hole right in the middle for a drain point. The ball will drop in at this end and roll all the way down the ramp to the bottom corner here, where I have an LED and sensor on either side of the ball to detect when it's in place. Then, this solenoid will fire it out of the bottom of the ramp and up into the next section of the puzzle. This channel goes up past the ball return mechanism and it curves around before coming back down to it. This way, when I fire the balls up here, they will get past the top of the ramp and get stuck so they can't roll back down. The ball lifter mechanism itself will prevent the balls from escaping from the end of the ramp, and I've included a series of holes in this end of the channel for the same LED and sensor arrangement that I had in the drain, so that the software knows how many balls are ready to be put into play. This is a long way for the ball to travel, but with the solenoid running on 24 volts, it does seem to just manage to fire the ball to the top of the ramp. I am a bit concerned about the power level though, as I'd really like to make sure that the ball can well and truly make it over the top of the ramp, even if there's a bit of an angle on the table. Luckily, while I was working on this mechanism, the larger solenoids I bought turned up. This was the next step up in size that I could find in frame type solenoids, but they're absolutely massive by comparison. The problem is, while they do provide a bit more force, they aren't really any faster, which I think is what I actually need. So instead of going bigger, I'm going to try stepping the voltage up again instead. I don't have a 36 volt power supply handy to test with, but I've made up a series adapter for two of my old drone batteries, which gets me up to almost 34 volts fully charged, which should be good enough for the test. Okay, that's definitely got enough power to ensure the ball makes it up every time. I'm thinking I might actually have to run a couple of different voltages across the whole game because things like the mini pop bumpers were already more than powerful enough at 12 volts, so running them at 36 volts would be way too much for the small area they're operating in. Since I've already mentioned the kickback mechanism, I guess I'd better show you that next. This design actually started as an auto launcher, but I've decided to keep it the same for the kickbacks as well, just for simplicity since they basically do the same thing. I got these arms laser cut at the same time as the pop bumper rings. They are also made out of 1mm stainless. They get folded on the etched lines and then they bolt onto this 3D printed mounting bracket like this. This double arm design will allow me to also run a mechanical plunger up the middle of the kickback mechanism for the main shooter lane, so I can auto launch balls as well as manually fire them to start the game. I've also included a rollover switch that's built into this mechanism since I'll need one for each of the kickbacks and the shooter lane anyway. It's using the same opto switch that I used on the top playfield area, and I've bent some of this 0.4mm spring wire as a spring to make sure they're as light as possible to press. Running at the same 34 volts I tested at before, these have a decent amount of power. I am still a little worried about the amount of power I have available, but I think I need to really build a baseboard as a test to actually confirm how much power I'm going to need. I don't have time to do that for this video, but I will definitely tackle it in the next one. While we're testing mechanisms, I need to give the slingshots another try with the higher voltage. Before I do that though, I need to do something about the rubber bands because you guys really weren't happy about the exercise band I used for them in the last video. Fortunately, shortly after the last video, a guy named Patrick reached out to me and offered to send a bunch of different pinball rubbers over for the project. He didn't even want a shout out, but he's going to get one anyway. His business is called Flippin' A, and they sell replacement silicone bands for pinball machines. They have heaps of different sizes and colours available, as well as complete kits for a whole bunch of machines. So if you need any rubber parts for your pinball machine, make sure you check them out. Patrick sent me heaps of different sizes, but these 2.5-inch ones are a good fit for my slingshots. All right, let's give it a test. Nice, that's so much better with the correct rubber and higher voltage. I reckon I've got time to tackle one more mechanism, so let's start looking at the wormholes. The wormholes actually have two separate functions in the game. Most of the time during play, they just capture the ball and spit it back out. But on certain levels, they actually transport the ball from one hole to another. I don't know if I'm going to be able to achieve that in real life, but for now, let's just see if we can at least catch and release the ball. I've created this housing which has two magnets positioned in the back of it, which should be enough to hold onto the ball, and the housing has a bit of an internal ramp, so as long as the ball makes it through the entrance, it should essentially get sucked in. Then, like most of the other mechanisms, there's just a basic 3D printed bracket and a stainless arm to fire the ball back out. If this is actually going to work with the wormhole function in the future, I'll have to move some stuff to make sure there's enough room to drop the ball down below, but for now, this will do for a test. I'm using the same LED and light sensor setup from the ball return earlier, but don't worry, I've got some proper IR LEDs and sensors on the way for this purpose. They just didn't arrive in time for the video. The magnets hold onto the ball perfectly, and there's plenty of power to fire it back out, so I'll call that a win. I'll have to see if I can work out a way to make the wormhole actually work for the next video. I still have to test the flipper and the pop bumpers with the smaller ball and higher voltage. While I do that, I just wanted to say thanks for the massive amount of support I received on the first video. I've had so many wonderful people reach out with ideas and offers of help. I know a few of you have pointed out that the artwork has already been redone for the virtual pinball recreation of this game, but I've already got someone working on it, and I will also need artwork for the cabinet and scoreboard, which I don't think the game has, so I think having an artist involved is still a good plan. I've also had a lot of people ask if they can pay me for a copy of the files for this project, so they can build one of their own. I hate paywalling stuff, but this machine is going to have hundreds of hours of work put into it, so I've decided to take a slightly different approach this time. I've set up a Patreon for the channel with the lowest suggested subscriber cost, and on there, I'm going to provide the files as I finalise parts of the project. I still work a full-time job, so I don't have enough spare time for proper behind-the-scenes content, but I will post some quick little clips and pictures as I get things working, so you'll get as much extra stuff as I can manage. And on the rare occasion that I have a video ready early, you'll get a link on there as soon as it's available. I know the cost of living is crazy right now, so if you want to wait till the end of the project and just sign up for 1 month, download all the files and then cancel, go for it. No hard feelings. I've put a link in the video description. The flipper and pop bumper are both working really well now, so I'm confident that they're ready to go into the machine. I do really need to start thinking about the gravity well effect and how I might be able to achieve at least something similar in real life. If you've got any good suggestions, please reach out in the comments and I'll try as many of them as I can in the next video. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm going to get stuck straight back into those wormholes. See you in the next one.